is stronger than our deepest fear. Children taken, hearts are breaking. God is counting every tear. Right or wrong before too long. Home is where we all belong. Let the children, let the children, let the children be set free. Let the children, let the children, let the children come to me. To their father, to their mother, to their home, their family. Let the children, let the children, let the children be set free. No way, no way, no way, no way we're gonna walk away. No.
Hello and welcome to another program at the Family Channel here in Bergen. In the studio today are Anita Skippervik and Yngve Nedrebø. Today we will present the program in English, as so many of you have expressed such wishes. We do not have a host with us today, but I think we will manage. So, Yngve, what is the theme we are going to present to viewers today?
Yes, today we will talk about the stress of children and the stress of the parents that the children are taken away from. We will deal with what is called the post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Yes, but before we look closer to the science and our ideas about why the children have such a bad time and suffer so much in the protection of the CPS, I want to say something about the process. It will not be time for the whole process, but I will say something about the starting point of these processes. Not every cases start with an emergency decision, but there have been some kind of investigation before, and perhaps they also have done some decision about some kind of measures that the families have been through. And at this stage, especially at the investigation stage, the control from the CPS are really strong, and mostly these measures have been camouflaged as help, but still behind this help, this control function, they are always there. According to the Norwegian CPS law, the investigation shall be as gentle as possible, but also that the CPS workers, they are all allowed to talk with the children alone. Many parents experience that the children change their behavior already from the first contact with the CPS workers. And the children, they get, some of them get unsure, they get tense and stressed, and after a while, some of them react start to acting out. Parents also changes and get symptoms of stress and anxiety, alarm or fear that something is wrong. If they had some kind of psychological pressures or problems before the investigation from the CPS, they often get a lot more of these symptoms by the help they are giving. In the investigation period, Karen Killen's methods and aims are standing strong. We will now show a page from one of her books where she instructs the CPS deliberately to stress the families and make them frustrated. This teaching has developed a practice with methods to give stress, and it has really gone wild. Only limited by their own fantasy. There are no control with these methods, official control, because it's oral. And this is used in both the examination of the parents and the children, and afterwards in these kind of measures. After every contact with the CPS, they write down reports that the family do not read and are able to comment. This is how the CPS can make a lot of documentation with only the CPS point of view. When the case comes to the county board or court, the family have no chances to go against the accusations from the CPS, since there are no evidence of from this investigation that can take their point of view. And they cannot show how the CPS have acted in their administrative practice. So the conclusions can therefore not be really tried afterwards in court. Now I will set this way of treating clients against the decisions, one decision the European Court of Human Rights. It is named North Ireland against Great Britain. In the decision, the methods the British police had used in their examination of IOI prisoners were found to be a breach of Article 3 in the Human Rights. And it was found inhumane and degrading. This decision is from 1978, but if it had been today, I would like to think that this had been a decision where the methods were seen as torture. The premises from the decision are that even if the methods not directly gave physical damage, it still gave them a serious psychological, physical and psychic strain that also led to an acute confusion or disordered state of mind. European Court of Human Rights concluded that the methods were inhumane because they created anxiety, fear, and inferiority in those examine it, and in a way that was humiliating, degrading, and suitable to break down the physical and psychological courage. Stress is useful in many circumstances, but if it lasts for a long time, it's harmful. And Professor Mark Flynn has done a long study on how children react to upbringing in different types of households. So, will you tell us something about that, Yngve?
Yes. Professor Mark Flynn is in Missouri, United States. He is a professor of anthropology, and he has been studying children stress in households in Santo Domingo over a long period. He has been studying 280 children. Over 20,000 different samples have been taken, and they have been analyzed, and he has made a 90 pages article on this one, and the illustration we have here is taken from that. It shows that you have different levels of cortisol, and you have 0, which is the average in the middle, and then you have 5 of the household types below the 0 point, and you have 4 above. And some of them are well under, some of them are a lot over the average. And if we go from left to right, we first have the children brought up in nuclear families, which means that they had their biological father and mother, and they were living with them, and we can see that that gives very low levels of stress. Then you have a few families where the father has been absent for up to 50% of the time, and still you have the same result. Still it is a stressless environment for the children. But if you move on to the children living with a single mother, you will see that the stress is well above the average. Then, if the single mother has her own kin, her own relatives living in the house with them, then the stress is down to almost the same as a nuclear family. So is the case where it is the grandmother, and even better if it's also a grandfather around. That gives stress on a very low level. If you have a family with a stepfather, it is just a little bit over the average, but if there are half siblings coming into the matter, then the stress is going straight up to a very high level. And the same and even worse would be the case where the children are living with distant relatives. So what this study really shows us is that for a child to live with his or her own father and mother, brothers and sisters, grandparents, that gives them a very low level of stress. While those living with a single mother, those living with a stepfather and half siblings, and those living with distant relatives, they have very high levels of stress. And what happens to children that has these circumstances with the very high levels? That is the question, and we will come back to that. But in his study from Santo Domingo, there is no children that have been taken away from their own families and sent out to strangers. And that is the case in Norway today, and that is really giving very high and shocking results on stress. So we can move on from this study and see a little bit more on what is happening in Norway. During a year, the Norwegian CPS will get around 53,000 reports of concern. We have 60,000 births per year in Norway, so 53,000 per year is a very, very high number. Those working in the CPS, they are stressing that you should be aware that there are more than one report of concern on those kids in danger, as they call it. But even so, we have a number of reports that equals 85% of the children born. That is extremely high. And the government of Norway has taken care, as they call it, of more than 14,000 children. At the moment, they are taking 1,500 new kids every year. And they are increasing the number taken as babies or at a very, very young age. That means that 1,500 per year out of 60,000 births equals 2.5%. So 2.5% of the newborn babies in Norway can expect to be taken by the government. That is extremely high figures. In the official statistics of Norway, they claim that they only take 0.7%, but that is way, way back in time. At the moment, they are taking 2.5%, which is more than the double of any other country I know of. The number of emergency decisions, which allegedly is the matter only of life and health, that has exploded. It is now obviously regarded as the norm, not the exception it was meant to be. Acute decisions are characterized by deficient investigation, the absence of documentation, and failing judgment. And the authorities use that because they can say that this is an acute situation. We need to move in now. So we do not have the time to make an investigation. We do not have the time to get the documents. And those judges that get these cases, they say okay in a very, very high number of these cases. 90 to 93%. And we even have some officials in Norway claiming with a public statement that it is better to take 9 children out of innocent homes rather than to leave 1 child behind. This is just outrageous. So why have we seen such a huge increase in the number of emergency orders and protective care? It is given clear guidance from the authorities, like in Norway, the Bufdir and the psychologists. They are talking about development, promotional affiliation as a new and guiding principle when determining what is in the best interest of a child. The Norwegian Psychological Association has applauded, thus giving the support to the proposals from what in Norway is called the Raundalen Committee in an investigation in 2012 called Better Protection of Child Development. There has never been given political acceptance to these new principles. But even so, they are now obviously guiding the practice by the CPS, and it demonstrates the views and the ideology of psychologists, judges, and the CPS workers. But if it is the promotion of development that is the point, why are the results so dramatically poor? And what is the fate of the parents of these children, dramatically and abruptly removed from their family, from their parents, their siblings, and their home? The answer is short, it's clear, and it's shocking. It's very bad. Child welfare children have problems with schooling. They are struggling with mental illnesses to a far greater extent than their peers. 51% of the children in foster care and 75% of the children in institutional care have received mental disorders. Statistics tell us that there are 8-fold increase in the risk of suicide among these children, and only 8% of them will receive higher education, compared to the 40% in the general Norwegian population. So only a fifth will have the same level of education as the others, as they had been given if they had not been taken away. So the parents who lose their children through death, they are struggling heavily, but they will have helping systems. The parents who lose their children through a government decision or a court decision will, in addition to the loss, also have to deal with shame, being branded as useless, and the CPS trying deliberately to marginalize and to isolate them. They are also injured by the public confidentiality, where the public will publish stereotypes and stories about parents who abuse their children, who beat their children, and who are heavily intoxicated and unable to care for their own children. They are constantly trying to use individual tragedies to generalize. There have been incidents of abuse known in the newspapers. There have been incidents of murder of children, and they are used to generalize. But of course, a murder or an assault cannot be used to take children away from parents who have never exercised violence and never have abused them in any way. Professional secrecy prevents parents from defending themselves, and representatives of the government throws out their general statements but will refuse to give any comment when question is raised on individual cases. So they are making a stereotype, and then they are not willing to discuss all the other cases. We know that there is less than 0.5% of the children taken which is on the use of sexual abuse. There are just 3% on the reason of violence against the children. A little bit more is about violence between the parents, which the authorities think is very bad for the children to see. Okay? But still, if we add up all of this, we will only have 14% of the 14,000 cases. 14% of the 1,500 children taken away every year. All the others, the vast majority of cases, are built on just assumptions about inferior eye contact. Parents are run into uncertainty. There are allegations of parents' ability to feed their children. They have, so the CPS say, bad ADL skills. We have heard of children taken away because their mothers are cutting too thick slices or too thin slices. We have heard of children taken away because their fathers smells sweat. Parents with different cultural background who are not sufficiently, have sufficient humility towards Norwegian excellency. They come to Norway and they claim that their own culture is on the same level as the Norwegian one. And this is by the CPS often regarded as an insult, and they take their children. So, from all of this, we know that a lot of children are taken away because the CPS claim that their parents are simple or retarded, or their parents have different values and different background from what the CPS applauds. So this is a result of intolerance and incompetence. And we find increasingly that it is produced false reports and false allegations in these cases. So why? Why is it so important to destroy families? We will have to look into some of the more factors and some of the research results. We have what is called PTSD, which is a severe anxiety disorder that can develop after exposure to an event that leads to a psychological trauma. It can develop after a threat of death to themselves or others, or as a result of violation against their own or others' physical or physiological, psychological integrity, an infringement which is perceived as overwhelming in relation to the individual's ability to cope. So this PTSD is diagnosed as a original trauma which gives flashbacks in the kind of nightmares, is in avoidance of stimuli associated with the trauma, and it gives increased levels of tension, such as problems with their sleep, anger, nervousness. The diagnostic criteria require that these systems will last for more than a month, and that they cause significant impairment in social, occupational, and other important areas of functioning. Well, to be honest, it's hard not to find this. Both the children removed from their parents and the parents who are deprived of their children will naturally get tremendous feeling of powerlessness. They are traumatized, and there is even every reason to assert that many of them get the PTSD. And then we could move on to a study in United States. They have studied families and children in foster care, and they have compared that to the statistics they have on soldiers from the Vietnam War and soldiers in the United States from other wars, later wars. And what they have found in a published study is that these children taken away from their parents, they have the double level of those exposed to war. So we know that to take away a child from its family, as Professor Mark Flynn has shown, it gives a much higher level of stress over a long time. His cortisol study has also been done in Oslo, showing the same result, that to move in and take away a child as a shock means that this child will have a very much higher level of cortisol over a long, long time. And that means that they will have a PTSD in a high number of cases. And that means that they will have bad sleep, they will have nightmares, and this will come on and come on. And as the study in the United States shows, this is extremely dangerous for a child. So it is twice as dangerous to be taken away from your family as to be in war, according to the study. There is also another important thing in the same study, that the ability, the chance of getting rid of the PTSD is only half among those children. Only 28% of them were later getting rid of the PTSD, compared to the soldiers, where 44% of them were able to get rid of it. So for a society to move in and take away children from their parents, it means that they are stressing the parents. In Norway, we can expect that the parents of these children have 10 times the suicide rate as of other parents in Norway. Very much of that is due to the stress. We have not been given the opportunity to study this in detail, but this is what we see. And this is what we are learning from other countries' studies. So to move around, use the system in Norway is producing big problems for the children. As I said a few moments ago, that there are 8 times higher suicide rate among these children. Only 8% of them, 1/5 of the normal, will get higher education. 51% of the children in foster care will have psychological disorder, and 75% of those in institutions. Compared to the rest of the Norwegian population, this is extreme. Compared to other countries, it's extreme. And in this situation, and with this knowledge, the Norwegian authorities are raising the number of children taken away. It's very hard to find a good reason for this. We can see that it's a lot of money involved. We can see that psychologists are doing a lot of good money as long as they agree with the CPS. If they don't agree with the CPS, they will not have a job next year. We also see that there is a lot of lawyers who are doing a lot of money from this. So they would like the system to go on. And we also see that foster parents are making a good lot of money. So a child taken before the age of 1 will give all these persons approximately $2 million until this child is 18 years old. So I'm afraid that we will have to say that it seems that money is the reason for increasing the number of children taken. Would we move on to the conclusion?
Yes. Now, when we have now heard Yngve tells us about the science, I would like to think compared with the limits of this European Court of Human Rights decision, it is my point of view that how the CPS deliberately use methods to stress parents and children in that children have to live under conditions many years with this stress level. It would be really, I would think it is a method, I would say, oh, I'm sorry. It's a long time since we used English. I think it would be a breach of Article 3 when we compare it with this decision that they were concluded that examination methods were a breach, but I would rather see this as really psychological torture. And I cannot understand why these terrorists and from curriculum should be used in this practice with stressed persons and families only to snatch a child. It should be allowed. It's they use so many methods in the work that no one can control because it's oral and you can't see them. You can only tell about it, but the court, they do not take it as evidence because parents will not think it's truthful, so they have to give the CPS right, and they think it's right because they can deliver so many documents, which is where it stands that the parents react this and this and this and this, so they have problems, but they have already stressed them, so they react in kind of wage way. And so this methods, you cannot imagine how they use it because and how it's developed, because it's developing for each cases. They do different things. They do not think about the law. They do not think about the human rights. They just think to get a child and get an administrative decision for this child.
Yes, they would like to win the case.
Yes. So, what can we do about it?
We can tell the world, and we have. There have been huge demonstrations. We know that Europe is aware of it now. There are 9 cases now coming up for the European Human Rights Court in Strasbourg. There are also, by the European Council, has started investigation into the CPS cases of Norway. So we hope. There are also come a new proposal to a new law. The problem is that the laws are not followed. But we will try to give information to the world. And by the help of the world, we will probably be able to make the CPS stop. These illegal practices of Norway will have to stop.
Yes, but I do not think that a new law or anything will stop this practice because there have been so much new laws from the government, and but in the practice, no.
Yeah. But we will have to stress this, tell all the world to be aware of this, what's happening, to see if we cannot make it stop. We will have to believe that. We will have to try very hard, because it is a disgrace to Norway.
Yes, but it still has to stop.
Yes.
And you cannot have these CPS workers do whatever they want, as long as they're not caught. So, is there some way we can catch this?
Yes, we are trying to go to the police and tell them, and show them, give them the evidence. And
doesn't work.
no,
No.
probably not. But by the help of pressure from outside, we are trying to talk to the politicians. We are trying to talk to the lawmakers. We are trying to give information. And that's what we have done now.
Yes. So, let's see if there is something we can do about it together with all of you. And I hope this was useful for you. And let's see what the next theme is for the next show in the Family Channel. And this was today's show. And it was a really serious theme. It's not right that Norway should give the children the sickness and call it help. So,
Then we say goodbye.
goodbye.